my homemade granola recipe, which I am absolutely obsessed with. It's become my absolute favourite thing to have for breakfast, and it's something that I wanted to do for a very long time, and I eventually found a window of time to do it over lockdown, and now I cannot eat any other granola than one I've made myself. So I'm going to be sharing with you what that recipe is today and showing you step by step how I make it. With making granola is that you can really make it how you want it. I never thought in a million years that I was going to be the kind of person to make my own granola, but there we go. And it is so amazing, so delicious. I cannot eat another granola ever again. It has really spoiled me. So yeah, I highly recommend that you do it. It is a bit of a pain in the arse because you have to like turn it every 10 or 15 minutes. But other than that, it's really easy. So if you're in the kitchen anyway, or you're cooking anyway, or I don't know, you're just watching something on a rainy Saturday morning, make the granola, because all you've got to do is hop back and forth to the oven 3 times, maybe 4 times, and it's done. And you can make it in a big batch and keep it for a while. It lasts for a good long time as long as it's in a sealed container. So I'd highly recommend that you do it. My other tip is to buy your ingredients in bulk. So again, once you've settled on perhaps buying the smaller bags and figuring out which stuff you like to use in your granola, I'd recommend finding somewhere that you can buy it in bulk because it just makes it a whole lot cheaper. I tend to use Holland & Barrett or buy Whole Foods online. And if you look at the price of any decent granola, which isn't just filled with filler and sugar, you will see that it is much, much cheaper to actually make it yourself. And you can put in it what you want as well. It's so tasty, it's so good, and it's really, really good for you. You've got the oats in there, you've got your nuts and seeds, and as you'll see at the end of the video, you can top it off with your fresh fruits as well. So it's a really fantastic breakfast. In terms of what I actually put in the granola, it's really, really simple. I use sunflower seeds, I use flaked almonds, I use pecan halves, I use oats as the foundation of the granola. I use maple syrup to sweeten it, coconut oil to bake it and make it brown, a touch of cinnamon, and what am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? Pumpkin seeds. How can I forget the pumpkin seeds? Pumpkin seeds as well. So that's what I put in it. So I just get all this stuff out and then I am ready to go. So before doing anything, I set the oven. I've got a fan oven and I set it to around 140 or 150 degrees and I leave it to preheat. So the first thing that I do is measure out the oats. I tend to use gluten-free oats just because I prefer them, and I tend to buy bigger ones rather than the smaller ones. I'm weird about oats. When it comes to making porridge, I like to use a very specific brand, which is Quaker gluten-free oats. But when I'm making granola, I like to use chunkier oats because I think it's just nicer, it makes granola chunkier. So I measure my oats and I use roughly around 300 grams, which you can see here. I'm not that precious about getting the exact amount, but I have just found that with the size of the baking tray that I use, this tends to fit quite nicely. I do put a lot of seeds in my granola. You don't have to at all if you prefer it less seedy, but I like mine with lots of nuts and seeds in there, which is probably why I use 300 grams of oats rather than like 400, just because there's so much stuff in it in the end. And I found that it just doesn't bake if I like cram it all on the tray on top of each other. It just doesn't work. If you have a bigger tray, if you put 2 trays in the oven, whatever, that's fine. I just use about 300 grams for this particular tray. Once you've got the oats all weighed out and ready to go, I just start throwing in the other ingredients. So the first thing that I tend to put in is the pumpkin seeds. I really don't know how much I use a lot. So you can see here that I'm just shaking them onto the top of the oats until it looks like there's enough. And then I just use my hands to move them around and just see how much is in there and really just get a feel of how many pumpkin seeds to oats I want the ratio to be. That didn't make sense. But just seeing how seedy it is, and yeah, I like to put quite a lot in there. The next thing I do is I add the sunflower seeds, which you can see here. Again, very similar approach that you will notice. I just kind of throw them in and see how it looks. So do the same with the sunflower seeds. You don't have to use these particular recipes, these particular nuts and seeds if you don't want to, but these are my favorites. So sunflower seeds go in and then I mix it by hand again. And this is just my dog tea towel, which I'm very, very proud of. So that's what that is. And then I added the flaked almonds in a very similar way to the others. I just kind of throw them in. You can see here the ones that I'm using are Crazy Jack's organic flaked almonds, which I just get from Tesco. So I throw those in. They're the only thing that I don't really buy in bulk. If I have them in, I'll add them. If I don't, I'm not too worried about it. So once you've got all these bits in, the next is the pecans. I get pecan halves, but you can get pecan pieces. I like to keep them quite chunky. So I would say you don't want to get them too small. I think this really makes my granola. I cannot imagine having this granola recipe without the pecans, so they are an absolute must for me. So this is my top ingredient, and all I do is I just break them up using my hand into a half again or a quarter piece, which I can't show you because I couldn't hold the camera and break them up at the same time, but there we go, they've magically appeared now in the bowl. So that's what I do, I chuck those in and then just mix all of that round. So you've got your oats, your sunflower seeds, your pumpkin seeds, your flaked almonds and the pecans as well. Okay, so the next thing is the liquid part, and this is really easy. So you just get a saucepan, or sometimes I just put a bowl in the microwave. In this case I'm using a saucepan, and all I do is I measure around 2 wooden spoonsful roughly of coconut oil and then 2 to 4 of maple syrup. This for me doesn't provide all the sweetness that I want in my granola. I tend to add a bit of maple syrup when I'm making it as a breakfast, so with every portion I'll add a bit of maple syrup on. You can choose to make yours sweeter during the bake if you want to, so feel free to add more. But I tend to find that between 2, 3 or 4 kind of wooden spoonsful, which I know isn't a proper measurement, is roughly about right. So like 2 or 3 tablespoons roughly. For the coconut oil, this is the thing that provides the browning. You can use other oils if you want. I haven't experimented with other oils, and because I use coconut oil for everything, there's always at least 1 pot of coconut oil somewhere in the house, even if I have to raid my makeup supply. A lot of recipes will suggest that you use more, and again, I think that's personal preference. For me, I don't like to add a lot of oil to things. I tend to try and reduce it where I can. So this is probably a bit conservative with the oil, but it tends to work absolutely fine. The other thing I add in here is a bit of vanilla extract. So I add about half a tablespoon roughly of vanilla extract for this amount of stuff. Again, that is also personal preference, so feel free to add more. So what I will do is I will heat up the coconut oil first of all, and then add the maple syrup in, and also the vanilla extract, and it just melts it all nicely into the pan, so you can pour it on easily. As I said before, you can use a microwave if you want to. I wouldn't put the maple syrup in the microwave, just microwave the coconut oil on a low heat until it melts, and then just throw in the maple syrup and the vanilla extract as well. Once that's all ready to go, all you do is pour it over your mixture and stir it through. You can tell here if you've got enough liquid. You want your mixture to be glossy-ish. As you can see here, it's kind of got a bit of a shine to it and it looks moist. You just want enough oil on it and enough maple syrup so that it browns nicely in the oven. The next thing that I add on top is the cinnamon. So just a shake of cinnamon. I'm not a huge cinnamon fan in the granola. I like it to be quite a gentle flavour in the background, but again, you can alter this and add more if you want to. So once your oven is up to temperature, you are then ready to bake. Woohoo! So you can see here the tray that I use is just a normal oven tray, and you can see that I've just put a bit of baking parchment or baking sheet at the bottom just so it doesn't stick. It also makes it a lot easier to turn the granola, so I'd highly recommend that you use baking parchment regardless of what baking tray you decide to use. And all I do is I pour out the granola, well, not pour it out because it's pretty solid, but tip it out of the bowl and just evenly lay it across the tray. It doesn't have to be even and flat along the top. You don't need to worry about patting it down. You can see that I've actually done the opposite and actually put some ridges in it just so that it browns quite nicely. So that's all you do. Lay it into the tray and then pop it in the oven for the first 15 minutes. So the most complicated, and it's not even that complicated, part of making granola is having to turn it every 10 or 15 minutes. I find that I don't really need to touch it for the first 15 minutes because it takes a while in that first session to brown. If your oven is a bit tricky or it's a gas oven, I check in at around the 10-minute mark at least, just to make sure that the top isn't catching. But for me, in this first round, once it's gone in the oven, I leave it for 15 minutes, and after 15 minutes is out, I then bring it out and turn it around. And this is where the baking parchment is helpful, because you can just flick it up from the edges. Once you've done that and you've given it a bit of a turn, you pop it back in the oven for another 10 or 15 minutes. Once that 10 or 15 minutes is up, you guessed it, same again. You're just basically rotating the stuff from the edges or at the top so that every part of the granola is browned. And I'll do this 2 more times. So in total, the granola is in the oven for 45 minutes. You can see that it looks perfectly brown, perfectly lovely, and ready to eat. Once it's out and it is ready, try not to eat all of the mixture, which is what I normally do because it smells so nice and it tastes so good. So try not to eat it all as soon as it comes out the oven, and just wait for it to cool. While it's doing that, I'm just going to show you what I top my granola with. So I always have raisins or sultanas, I have cacao nibs, and I also have a lot of fresh fruits as well. I'll sometimes use some toasted coconut chips as well, which you can see here. So you can see here that I'm using a banana. I've also got a passion fruit as well, and then the cacao nibs, the raisins, the coconut chips, as I mentioned before, and then also the maple syrup. I always add a tiny splash of maple syrup as well, just to make it extra sweet. I will always use coconut yogurt to top off my granola. If I'm eating it as like a midnight snack or something, well, not midnight because I'm not awake till midnight, but a nighttime snack, then I might just put like oat milk on it. But if I'm having it as a proper breakfast, I will use coconut yogurt. I used to be a Koyo woman through and through, but I've recently converted onto Coconut Collaborative just because it's cheaper, and I actually prefer it now because it's just a bit thinner. It's still very thick and it's still very creamy, but it's just a bit thinner and nicer to go on the breakfast. It goes a lot further, and yeah, it's really tasty. So that is what I will use. So once everything is cool, you're ready to store it. I store a good portion in just a jar that I have lying around that's left over from something else, so I'll store it in a jar. And I also use an old granola packet as well, which has got a Ziploc seal at the top, so I just store it in there. So you can store it whatever is sealed, basically, as long as it's airtight, it won't go off. Mine has lasted for a good few weeks when I kind of go in and out of phases with breakfast, but generally it doesn't hang around long enough for me to know when it goes off. I tend to eat it within a week easily. I am always excited to eat this. I literally wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh yes, I get to eat that granola again. So yeah, and you can really play with this. You can put whatever you want on it for breakfast. This is what I like to use, and I would highly recommend it. It is delicious. So that is my homemade granola recipe and my step-by-step guide of how to make it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, pop it below. I'll also put a full link of the recipe below as well, so you can follow it along a bit easier. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.